Shalom. Welcome. Peace, everyone. Let me know if you can see me. Let me know if you can hear me. Welcome to another midday motivation. It is Thursday. I meant to get on Tuesday, but I was like, yeah, you know what? Thursday seems to have we seem to have good responses on Thursday. So here we are. Here we are. Here we are. And I thought that it would be good to start covering some of the superfoods that we consume, right? And some of the superfoods that I utilize in a lot of the demos and some of the some of the food prep that I do and some of the food prep recipes that I share with you all. So today, bee pollen would be I thought it would be one of the better um, products to really review or talk about and share because I know I know for one there's always the argument people love to have with you about what you eat personally. There's always the argument about like whether you're vegan or not, if you're consuming bee pollen and bee royal jelly and other foods. But I really think it's important to think about the wide range and wide variety that we can utilize to sustain ourselves, right? And that sustenance is not just to have, like a wonderful physical body that's glowing, but to make sure that we have both the internal and the external. We to make sure we have the mind and the spirit all aligned and being in oneness with Yah. So I think paying attention to what we shouldn't consume is rather important. And I think, not think, but I know for me, the focus is looking at the forbidden foods and making sure those aren't consumed, and looking at the foods and so on that are nutritious, highly nutritious for us to consume. And they're, like they're within the um, the list of foods that we can consume. So, you know, the secular world doesn't dictate what I consume, nor do their boxes and squares that they used to define themselves. That doesn't define me, nor does it pigeonhole me. I utilize the laws of Yah to identify where I pull my nutrients and resource of sustenance from, right? So, yeah. If you can see me, all right. So a whole lot of beautiful people just showed up. If you can see me and hear me clearly, please let me know. I chose not to use my headphones today because it isn't breezy. It is hot, but not breezy. Um, so let me greet everyone. Chief Yuya, give thanks and praise for being present. Thank you for always opening up and sharing space and allowing me to be able to have this space and platform to speak. Because if not for how you have charged and challenged us all, yeah, I wouldn't have the muster up the courage to be up here. So thank you. Thank you, Sister Kashia, always in the space. Brother Antonio, peace, top tier speakers. Give thanks. Give thanks for being in the space, and thank you for your share early on this early on this dawning. Brother Antonio says everybody was greeting each other, and so okay, so I'm clear. All right, good. So let us jump in. So today I'm gonna start off my discussion before I even get to bee pollen. I'm gonna talk a little bit about just honey in general, right? Especially raw honey. I grew up enjoying honey, but I never enjoyed raw honey or never knew I was enjoying raw honey. And I say enjoy, but honey was really used as a medicine. Growing up, I would see it used on burns and, just to soothe healing burns and wounds and so on. So it's interesting how it's utilized, and you see it being used, but you really don't realize how potent and how highly nutritious it is, and how many bioactive ingredients are available to us when we consume it. But honey was always a big thing as I was growing up, and it was used to deliver medicine, right? It was used to deliver medicine. So um, the sweetness kind of offsets all of the other bitter things, right? That we would ingest. Um, Cod liver oil being one of them. And if you if you were grew up in the Caribbean, I don't know here if that was a thing, but if you grew up in the Caribbean, you know at the beginning of every school year, cod liver oil, um, I guess shot was rather important, right? Cod liver oil shot was the one of the first things you got, along with a couple of other things, a couple of other pharmaceutical meds at that time. But I digress. I wanted to share really quick, and you'll see me glancing at my notes because I want to make sure that I'm covering everything. Greetings, Sister Deidre. All right, greetings, greetings. If you all see raccoons in the background or squirrels, let me know because I am sitting here and it is busy. There's a whole lot happening. I could tell they're all over the place. Um, but I hope none of them jump on me today. Oh, Brother Antonio says every school year, more like every day. Yep, but you know what? There was a lot of it. There were a lot of shots, like precautionary shots that we would have to take. But yeah, it was a big deal. It was a big deal. It was a big deal. He said they'll be 20, well, 20 seconds too late is better than nothing. Um, oh my goodness. I caught a spider today and I meant to share that. It's just a big one. It's huge. Anyway, let me jump in. So my fascination with honey, as a teacher, I began to explore a little bit more about the ideas of honey as a sweetener, but how it connects to knowledge and wisdom. And this is not about knowledge and wisdom, but it is in a sense. What I started to dig into that a little bit more of that when I came across the work of Patricia Polacco. And Patricia Polacco actually, she has a piece, and in that piece, one of the things that stood out to me was that the statement, honey is sweet, right? Honey is sweet. And she goes on to say, and so is knowledge. But knowledge is like the bee that made the sweet honey. You have to chase it through the pages of a book. So knowledge is the bee, right? It's like that bee that produces that sweet honey. So gaining knowledge is crucial. And Proverbs 24 also, sheds light on how, it makes that correlation to wisdom with a honeycomb, right? Proverbs 24:13-14 says, eat honey, my son, for it is good, and the honeycomb is sweet to your taste. Know that wisdom is sweet to your soul. If you find it, there's a future for you, and your hope will never be cut off. So there's this connecting to honey to sweetness, because honey is sweet. But there's this connection of what I consider like joy. And, I connected to that joy that you feel when you're going through something or you're overcoming. And then there's just this peace of satisfaction and sweetness of having overcome. So there's this Patricia Polacco and those other quotes that I utilize just kind of helps to shed light on the fact that, there's a sweetness that we can connect to gaining knowledge and using it and, like receiving wisdom, right? I really think that's important. Whenever I move out of the screen, please let me know, because I feel like I think I have my camera facing the wrong way. Let me know. I'm gonna turn it. I'm gonna do something while I'm on live. I'm gonna turn it and think. I hope it doesn't fall apart. I hope it doesn't fall apart. Now I'm upside down, right? Oh my goodness. Is this better? Can y'all see me? Is it better now? Is it better now? I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait. I can't get it to stay. I'm gonna turn it back. Now upside down all over the place. I don't know why I did that. I know why I did that, but I was trying to actually turn it so that you could see me, like, widescreen. It's fine. But anyway, right. So back to the conversation around, um, connecting the ideas of knowledge and wisdom and its sweetness, right? So, yeah, I just wanted to share that before I um, jumped into honey. So raw honey, right? Let's talk about the actual raw honey. So raw honey is utilized in a couple of different ways. It was fine. Yes, horizontal looks great. I know it does, but I can't get it to stay. So I'll just keep it this way. I'll just keep it this way. All right. So raw honey, right? So, and I say raw honey, you probably say, well, what's the difference between regular honey and raw honey? So raw honey is, of course, not heated at all. Most people, some people heat. A lot of companies that sell honey that's heated. The problem is the heating actually removes a lot of its active compounds and a lot of the bioactive ingredients that help with soothing things like burns and enzymes that are active that help to reduce inflammation in the body, right? So when you consume or you're electing to utilize honey, make sure you look for raw honey. And that label on there has to state that it has not been heated, because by overheating or heating honey, it actually removes those biological substances that are bioactively available to us, right? We use in our elderberry elixirs and our elderberry tonic, we use raw honey specifically for that reason, right? Because all of the enzymes and active properties are very much present. Heating increases its glycogenic index. I see. So that means that the glycemic index increases and it is absorbed much faster, and it causes glycemic spikes in the blood. That's what that interesting. So that's a great point to note, that selecting the heated actually affects the glycemic index, right? And that would increase the levels of blood sugar in the body. That's Brother Antonio says, thank you, Chief, for sharing that. Oh my goodness, I have a spider crawling all over me. Brother Antonio says, a lot of honey distributors say raw, but you want to look for unpasteurized on the label. That's correct. That's correct. Make sure you look for unpasteurized, because it's that heating process, right? And most people, people process the honey, but I don't know how many companies are like really involved in all of the pay attention rather to all of the active healing compounds of it. They just know it's a sweetener and it's an alternative, and honey is more than a sweetener, way more than a sweetener. If my screen gets dark, just let me know, please, because I'm finding that it looks dark and light sometimes. But thank you for that point, Brother Antonio, that a lot of distributors say raw, but it's unpasteurized. And don't just look for raw honey that looks white, right? Because you can whipping honey gives it that white look or creamed look, and creamy raw honey is different from raw honey, right? Some raw honey does not have that whitish appearance. That's because they whip it or they beat it. So just don't let the visuals of it fool you, because there are all these different ways of making things look and appear one way. Make sure I say research the distributor and follow it all the way to the processor and the beekeepers, right? Because sometimes that's where the truth lies. Ask questions, call the company and find out. And once you find a company that's reputable, stick with them. So jumping on, because today we're not even talking about honey. The focus is really bee pollen, but I wanted to jump into all of the other byproducts, right? Good, sister. This is Ema Sequoia, top tier speakers. I have to remember to switch my brain. Top tier speaker says I do the honey test to check. What is the honey test? What is the honey test, Ema Sequoia? Can you share that with us? Because it might be something that I'm overlooking or not aware of. So can you tell us, describe what the honey test is in the chat for us, please? And while I do that, honey has a calming effect on the body, and it's also, again, as I said before, highly nutritious, inflammatory, antibacterial. So there are just so many different ways of utilizing it for those benefits. If you're going to use it in tea, try to use it when it's warm. If you use raw honey in very hot water, or you even boil it, it denatures the active ingredients and active properties, and you want to make sure that you maintain or you keep them so it just doesn't become a sweetener. You're actually adding nutrients to your tea. Another thing I know people look for is crystallizing, right? So sometimes you hear people say, and that has happened before. That's how I know which companies to actually purchase from. Some honeys have sugar added to them. So all honey will crystallize over time. All honey, anything that is sweet becomes concentrated, it begins to crystallize because the compounds begin to form networks and chains that are no longer just in liquid form. They begin to actually create crystals of structure and bonds in the honey itself. So you'll see, you might turn the bottle over and you find that it looks like it's creating something in there, right? The way that's crystallization, and that's fine. The problem becomes when you look at the crystals and they begin to look like little sugar granules almost. You have to question whether sugar was actually introduced into the original honey liquid, and then you were sold something that was not authentic. All right, so top tier speaker says you put a little honey in water, and if it dissolves, it's not raw honey. If it sticks to the bottom, it's supposed to be pure and natural. You put a little honey in water. All right, but it will dissolve over time. Are you saying it should dissolve over time? It just should not dissolve immediately. It should not dissolve immediately. All right, we'll take that. I'll take that, because depending on the temperature of what you're putting it in, it will probably just stick to the bottom, because if it's honey, it is very difficult to dissolve in, like a cooler liquid. That's a good test. That's a good test. All right. So thank you very much for that. Thank you. Now, let's look at royal jelly, right? So royal jelly was something that I started to use when I came to the United States, and I only learned about it. I didn't know what it was at all. Yes, thank you for that test. Never knew about it either. But it makes sense, right? Practical. So royal jelly is another byproduct of beets, right? And again, you're gonna have people argue with you. They're gonna be like, okay, you're not vegan if you're consuming bee products. Listen, I no longer identify as vegan. I identify as Anu. It don't matter. It doesn't matter. If you're focused on a plant-based life and there are specific items that you're going to consume, you consume them for their nutritional benefits, right? That's the key. That's the reason why I identified with vegan lifestyle in the first place. All right. It was about the health of my community, myself, and my relatives. Brother Antonio says the first time raw honey crystallized happened to me, I was super confused. Right, right. Yeah, because you tend to think that you know, it's bad, or the batch went bad or something. So yeah, it's important to know all of these things and the tests, the little tests and so on that you can do to kind of identify what's good, what's not. All right. So royal jelly is an excellent superfood, excellent supplement to utilize specifically for elders and women who are trying to increase fertility or want to remain fertile. Um, Royal jelly is really good. Now you're probably saying, well, where does royal jelly come from? So royal jelly is actually created by worker bees, and then nurse bees. Like all these different sections in the bee kingdom, right? They're all doing something. They all have something that they do. So the nurse bees actually feed the jelly to, just like the larva. And the truth is, there's a difference between, well, the larva consume that, but the queen itself consumes that royal jelly. That's why it's considered or called even royal jelly, because that's what the queen bee that's what the queen bee lives on, right? Not even predominantly, like that's what the queen bee lives on. So, and it does, royal jelly does have a creamy, how should I call it, hazy look to it. It almost looks as if it's creamed honey when you purchase it. It is extremely expensive, but it is valuable. You do see increased levels of, and again, that's because of the levels of hormones and other active compounds that are present in royal jelly. I keep looking down at the screen, so forgive me. That's present in royal jelly that makes it its ingredients available or bioactively available for increasing energy and even stabilizing your cycles, right? Cycles of menstruation and hormonal, helping with hormonal balance. Sorry, my screen is blank for a couple seconds. All right. So another point that I wanted to bring up about royal jelly is that it's secreted from, I think I said that, young worker bees, and the nurse bees kind of transfer it to the larva, and the queen bee consumes it. Again, much more expensive than raw honey, and also if it is used, but you pour it into bee vomit, isn't bee flesh anyway. Well, if you say bee vomit is honey, then when we start talking of, please don't put that in the chat. When we start talking about bee pollen, then it's going to be a whole different story, because that's another could be considered another waste material of bees, right? Bee pollen. But we'll call it bee bread. Just, like, yeah, honey, not bee vomit. Okay, thank you. And bee pollen or bee bread, not anything else. Please. But she says bee vomit isn't bee flesh anyway. Okay. But I think bee flesh is permissible. Isn't it? I don't know. So on to bee pollen. So bee pollen actually, oh, that's the other thing I wanted to point out, that royal jelly is actually a great addition to the diet of those who are elderly, because it does help to increase vitality. And again, we're dealing with a sweet, we're dealing with something that is carb heavy, but it's really about the increase in energy that you get when you consume things like royal jelly and raw honey. So, and that's also very much the case with bee pollen. All right. So I don't know if you all could see it. Some people are familiar with it, but some are not. So this is bee pollen. Please don't say it. Don't say what it looks like. Bee whatever. But this is bee bread. So you'll find that there are variations in its color, right? And I think I've shown some of this before. There are variations in its color, gold to yellow gold tones, browns. But those variations are those aren't an issue. Actually, if you purchase bee pollen and you don't see the variations in color, then you probably have an inauthentic product and you want to return it. All right, you want to make sure that there's it's variegated in its shading of yellow and golds. This is high in protein and it is also high in vitamins and a wide array of vitamins B, C, D, E. There's K also in there as well. So bee pollen. All right, bee pollen. Its properties. So you're gonna notice that a lot of all of the byproducts and so on that we get from bees all help all they all help with inflammation, right? They all help with inflammation. And they all have that soothing and calming effect on the body, whether you take it internally or you're applying it to wounds. Bee pollen isn't really applied to wounds. Can you all still see me? I just had a flip. My screen just flipped a little bit. Bee pollen isn't applied to wounds, but it's consumed internally, and it, in terms of being an anti-inflammatory, it works very similarly to turmeric in that you find that its active compounds, actually what they do is they help to reduce toxic compounds that are produced in the tissue, and those toxic compounds are what causes the irritation and results in what we sense or perceive as inflammation, right, in our muscle tissue and our body. And so it counters, consuming bee pollen actually counters that effect. So bee pollen as well is another excellent thing to add, supplement or so to our superfood, this new term superfood, make you superhuman. It's also an excellent thing to add to the diet or your dietary lifestyle if you have youth, but also if you have elders who struggle with energy or struggle with inflammation as well. All right. And even combining it as a daily supplement along with things like turmeric and a turmeric drink, you can't go wrong. Let's go to the chat. Oh my goodness. So Deidre says, is it vomit or from the other end? I'm not paying attention to y'all, to that. I'm not doing it. Chief US says, does not look like vomit, but biologically. Deidre says, it has an interesting look. Can you show it again? The bee pollen. Do I need to show it again? Oh, okay, good. I did. I showed it. So you saw it. Yeah. They look like that because they're little balls. So what happens is the process is, of course, bees go out, they forage, they jump up in the flowers. I say jump up. They jump up in the flowers, they collect all of the little pollen. The pollen kind of sits there on their legs, but then the pollen is actually mixed in with some of the bee hormones, and then it's processed and they pour it into the honeycomb. But then there are thin layers of wax and honey that's mixed into the balls, and they sit in the honeycomb and they actually ferment. So that fermentation process, along with the mixing of the honey, which in this case would be raw honey, and the wax, actually produces what's called bee bread, right? Or these little balls here. So no, they do not come out any end. They just they're just processed by the bees, and they produce this very potent supplement that we call bee pollen. Now, the thing about bee pollen is they're very hard. You can eat them raw if you like. I just had some. They're chewy, but they're most easily digestible when you soak them. So if you're going to use them let's say you're going to add them to yogurt or anything, soak them in a little bit of milk, soak them in a tiny bit of water so that they can become softened and easy to dissolve, right? Easy to dissolve. That's important. Um, I actually have some green juice that I used, um, in which I used some bee pollen. I added bee pollen to this combination. This is the green skin god. So in this combination, I didn't soak the bee pollen before I used it because it's liquid. I'm blending it. So I just poured a tablespoon or two, depending on how big of a batch you're making. I just poured it into the drink along with ginger and other things and blended that. So, you know, pretty easy to use. Doesn't require too much preparation at all. And soaking is only necessary if you're going to add it to a dry or something that's creamy, as opposed to if you're making something liquidy, right? Like a shake, smoothie, and so on, anything that you're going to blend. How is the pollen harvested? How do we know it is not from stressed out buzzers? We don't know it's not from stressed out buzzers because I don't know, and I won't presume I know that what stresses me out as a human stresses out a bee. I think we see animals and we're like, oh my gosh, you know, they're so pretty and they're so cute, and they're not over there trying to be cute. They're just doing their thing. We'll look at them and we're like, oh my gosh, they're stressing out. The sun, it's too hot. No, they're functioning and they're good. Um, Stressors. What I will say is important to pay attention to is who is harvesting, right? Who's harvesting and whether they're using chemicals to sedate the bees, and if those chemicals have a severe effect on them, because it's going to affect the honey, and it's also going to affect the pollen, because again the pollen is mixed in with some of that raw honey that the bees produce. So important to think about the other thing. So maybe that could be considered a stressor in that sense. But no, they're not over there stressing about gas prices or any impending response requirements for taking uh, yeah, taking vaccines and other things. Like they ain't having that issue at all. Um, Whether there's also to some consideration for the type of environment, you know, the type of environment, and again the types of flowers that they help to pollinate, and the types of flowers that they're in close vicinity to where they are, and the types of flowers they feast on and drink nectar from. That's important too, because if you have allergies to particular flowers and weeds and so on that produce flowers that they drink nectar from, it can cause allergic reaction to other people, right? To people, right? So that I think those things are important to think about. But I bet things. Okay, let me go back. Can it get can it get you drunk? If it's fermented, no, it can't. At least I don't think so. I never tried it. I don't know about that, Brother Antonio. You're gonna have to try it and tell us. You're gonna have to try to tell us. I have just a few minutes left. She says it is a form of vomit, but it doesn't entwine with the digestive tract. So it's oh my goodness, but anatomically could be considered a regurgitation. I consider it a regurgitation. I do. I consider it I think it is a just that. It is just that. But its benefits far outweigh um, that process. So I'm not too grossed out about it, and I don't think anybody else is. But that's like good to know. Sister Deidre says, I give thanks. But Chief US says, I bet things like fireworks and carbon monoxide and other human activities stress out bees, birds, squirrels, chipmunks. Yes, this is true, but I don't know how that probably does have an effect, because I mean stresses for us, right? Stresses release particular hormones in our body, And I don't know if that is the case. That's why it's like, yes, I'm sure those things stress them out, but whether it produces a hormonal effect in the bee's body that also augments the type of honey they produce, which will also affect the type of and quality of the pollen, not the pollen, the bee bread or the bee pollen and the honey and wax even that is produced. I don't know. I'm sure it probably does, but I don't know to what effect it does. Because again, all of those, you know, I don't, our bodies don't function like bees bodies don't function like us, but I agree, those are definitely um things that would stress out a bee. But again, I can't say, like what if I know carbon monoxide for sure. Fireworks, I don't know because I don't know about, and that's something that I'm gonna dig into. I don't know how loud noises such as fireworks and even I know their like their visibility, right? Their eyesight is pretty good, and there's this like idea of being attracted to colors and so on. But I don't know, so I could see how fireworks could affect them in that way. In terms of being their sensitivity to sound, I don't know how, like it would be interesting to find out how those things affect the production of honey and so on. Sister Deidre says, I mean, like being agitated by humans with smoke or constant interaction with them on a bee farm. Yeah, especially also too when humans attack them, right? They're just going on around their merry way, and they're humans who just start like totally flipping out and freaking out because they see a bee, and then they start swatting them. I'm pretty sure that increases their stress levels. Their cortisol levels probably, go through the roof. um, Brother Antonio says, turn up. The chief US says, the reason I say that is because these particular activities are known to even cause seizures in birds and small rodents. This is true. This is true because, yes, it does increase birds are so tiny, they're so small, and their hearts get affected so quickly. And once sometimes it will, yes, cause seizures and even die because the heart rate beats so quickly, right? It beats so quickly. So yeah, I definitely agree. I could see how those can affect them. Bees seem so otherworldly. They seem so alien, right? Um, Sister D just says, yep, and they leave their babies sometimes when they get scared like that. Yeah, this is true because if there's a threat on to them. But Antonio says the chemical contents of bee smokers can alter honey products. Ethiopians smoke out bees as well, but their hives are usually in the forest, and they use smoke that is mainly made from dried manure. Yes, this is true. This is true as opposed to a chemical. This is true. And if you're using certain chemicals, I can see how that could be absorbed by the honey and then, of course, affect um, the chemical components in the honey. Sister Deidre says, yes, they attacked me first. So walk away. Walk away and stop adding to the stress levels of the bees. Okay? But that's it for today. I just wanted to share a little bit about around some of the superfoods that we use um, a lot of and consistently in a lot of the foods that we prepare. And, again, those are three that you want to consider. We had Ima Sequoia in the chat share with us that, an easy test to do is to take a drop of honey and place it in your liquid or your water. And if it sinks to the bottom and it kind of sits there, then you have honey. If it dissolves immediately, then you have something else, right? And you could test that. You can test what that looks like when you compare its ability to dissolve with that of things like agave and syrups, right? Because a syrup, if you have a syrup, it will definitely dissolve very quickly, right? It won't sit as a lump at the bottom, and then it requires you to kind of vigorously get it to dissolve. So that's great. Chief Yuya also shared some insight in terms of considering how all of, like human activities does affect bees, and I mean to the extent where now there is a global um, cry, and a lot of attention is being placed on the decreasing levels of the bee population, right? Very important to consider. And there are lots of, there are lots of questions around what is causing those drastic decline, or that the drastic decline in the bee population. So again, human activity, it does displace and interrupt their natural habitats all the time, and so we do have to consider how we encroach on their livelihood, right? Very important to consider, right? That's why, you can consider wild crafted honey. But like you all can tell me what you think about that wild crafted honey, um, or wild harvested honey versus honey that's produced on a bee farm or so. Because, and I ask that question because I guess I feel different ways about it. I think if we can create sustainable areas where we can produce bees and utilize them in that way versus constantly encroaching on and removing their natural food from, you know hives that are in the wild. I definitely think it helps to support them and helps to increase the population of bees in their natural habitats, while we're able to you know create or produce honey for our consumption. So we're not constantly encroaching on, the way they live or the way they function. Um, but you can put those comments in the chat beneath the video after we close off. If there are no further questions or no other shares, thank you all for interacting. Thank you all, those of you who respectfully walk away from the bees, even though they appear to attack you. Thank you for not swatting them. I know who you are. Those who are swatters, I know who you are too. Stop attacking the bees. Thank you all for being in the space. Brother Antonio says not just increasing the numbers to pimp them out. Right. Oh my goodness. That reminded me of something Dr. Leila Africa talked about. Oh my goodness. Anyway, you are welcome. Thank you all for sharing in the space. I am going to see you all next Thursday, same time, 12:30, and we are going to dive into some more superfoods. See you all again. Peace and power to you all. Wellness is yours. Wellness is yours. Definitely yours. If you want it, if you really want it. Peace.